Now that after the keynote we have established that you guys know nothing about architecture and that we're all pseudo-architects, is how we're called now. Can't believe I came all the way from the States to hear that. No, I'm kidding. So let's talk about how to build enterprise-ready mobile applications. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I play this mobile game from every different angle. I'm the co-founder of two companies. Kidosen is really an enterprise mobile platform as a service. Think about like an entire enterprise mobile middleware, a mobile platform as a service, a thing that gives you mobile capabilities for, backend capabilities for your enterprise mobile apps that gets you from your iPhone app to your SAP or to your SharePoint in 2 lines of code. But I also started, prior to Kidosen, I started a company called Telago that is a professional services firm that grew really, really fast in the US. It was named 2 years in a row one of the fastest growing private companies in the US. And Telago specialized in big enterprise software trends, so things like cybersecurity. We were very early in mobile, very early in big data, cloud, and we advise companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon in their technology strategy. So I'm still an advisor. I sit at the board of a few software companies. I do a lot of speaking and writing, some occasional investment, and those are some blogs. One about technology, one about business, and that's the only thing you're gonna hear about me all morning. So what I would like to do about today is, on today's session, is to talk a little bit about, give you a view of what it takes to build mobile apps in the enterprise. Then do a little bit of a comparison about the difference between consumer and enterprise mobile apps. There are some very tangible difference that a lot of organizations, I advise a lot of CIOs in their enterprise mobile strategies, and it is surprising how a lot of these things just, we manage to ignore them. But the bulk of the session is gonna focus on patterns for building enterprise mobile apps. What are some of the challenges that you might face and some of the techniques that you might use to solve it? I'm gonna give you some tips about technologies that might help you with that, but this is not about product. Today is about real world solutions, not theoretical exercises. Those are things that we're seeing in the field. It's about architecture best practices. We're not gonna pitch you any product, including ours. There is a section on which we're gonna list a few players on different spaces just to help you if you are evaluating some of those technologies, but definitely not in the best practices section. Does that make sense? Is there anything that you would like me to cover that is not in that agenda, which I put together on a flight back from the States at 4 a.m. in the morning, so it's probably wrong. Cool. So let me tell you a quick story about building mobile apps. So enterprise mobile is the hottest trend in enterprise software these days. No big data, no cloud, no gamification. Nothing compares with what companies are doing in terms of building solutions for connected devices. I was telling one of our advisors, one of my board members the other day, that the thing I love about mobility is that on every other area called big data, cybersecurity, any of this, when I was going to a customer, I was the expert. I was the guy who was gonna tell you how you should be thinking about things, right? With mobile, I'm learning more from our customers than they're learning from me, because companies are coming up with all sorts of crazy ideas, creative stuff, redesigning existing business processes in the form of mobile applications, creating brand new business processes to work on a smartphone and tablets as first-class citizens, things that we have never, ever thought about it before. So, I have meetings with architects and developers, and they're like, what do you think about doing it this way? And we're like, oh my God. And I was supposed to be here to tell you how to do things. And they're just coming up with all sorts of ideas because mobile is pushing the boundaries of the enterprise. So these are exciting times to be in enterprise software. These are probably the only thing that compares with this was the web, the evolution of the internet and the evolution of the web back in the early 2000s, but I was in high school back then, so I definitely missed that one. So these are really, really exciting times. And the interesting thing about mobile is that right now, we classify the state of maturity in enterprise mobile in three categories, and I even forgot the names. But some companies start with doing just email and calendar. That's trivial, right? We want to do email and calendar and manage devices. Then there's some, from there you move to building some mobile apps, which typically are a representation of existing business processes. So you have this website that IT build that does this thing, and we would like a mobile representation of that. We would like it to, a native app or a hybrid app or an HTML5 app for enabling certain field workers and all this stuff. The top maturity level is when organizations stop thinking about how to take something they have today and make it mobile, and start thinking about how to reimagining brand new capabilities using mobile devices as a first-class citizen. So in the same way SaaS emerged as a standalone category, you can put your money on the fact that mobile-first business applications are going to be a standalone capability in the market. And when you talk to venture capitalists, which I do all the time, that are looking at this market, there are some firms that have an entire investment thesis about mobile-first business app. The same way you have a Salesforce.com, a NetSuite, an Oracle CRM on demand, you're going to have those capabilities in mobile. You're going to have applications that work in your smartphone and tablet first, and then they have a web representation or a SaaS representation as a second-class citizen. Does that make sense? Cool. So those are sort of the maturity models of mobility, but it's definitely hot. Everybody's thinking about this. Any of you guys is working for an organization that never talk about mobile or is not thinking about mobile? No? Cool. It's also obvious, right? Everybody wants to do it. Who will say no to that? But the thing is that mobile is mostly driven by somebody somewhere in the organization that they want an app, right? It's not driven by this, grand strategy of. And I was having a meeting last night with one of our partners here. Is one of the very large system integrators. And he was telling me something that I never thought about. He said, look, U.S. organizations in North America tend to be more strategic. Like they like to do, strategy sessions for mobility and formulate these grand plans. In Europe, we're more like tactical. We like to solve a problem and go after it. And it was like, that's another way to say that Europeans are smarter than Americans, but, I get it. But essentially you have somebody in HR, somebody in marketing, somebody in finance that say, hey, I want an app, and that triggers the entire conversation. How are we going to enable that? So the guys working on mobile are the exciting guys, right? Those are the ones playing with new technology, learning new stuff, delivering value to an organization. So it should be simple because after all, we have a ton of technology for building mobile apps. So the mobile development ecosystem has exploded over the last few years. We have 701 frameworks for building HTML5 mobile apps. We have hybrid with technologies like PhoneGap or hybrid interpreter with technologies like Titanium. We have the native stacks. We have cross-compilation technologies like Xamarin that allows you to build in .NET and compile to iOS or Android or Windows Phone. So this should be trivial. Whether you're a JavaScript developer, a Java developer, a .NET developer, there is a ton of technologies at your disposal. So this should be very simple, right? So let's start building mobile solutions. And that's sort of, I know it sounds like a little bit ironic, but this is sort of the path that a lot of organizations follow. They think that building a mobile strategy, building a mobile infrastructure is a matter of figuring out how to build a specific app, and it's way more complex than that. So let's take a look at a few things that we should consider, and you tell me whether you think I'm crazy or whether we're missing certain things. For instance, suppose that we're starting to build a mobile app you're starting to build a mobile app for your enterprise right now. Every mobile app needs data. And I'm not talking about data in the form of your SAP records of your Salesforce.com leads, or of your line of business apps. I'm talking about data that is specific to the app, like caching settings, like caching data, like session management. Every mobile app comes with a storage component. Even if you have all your line of business data elsewhere, which is most likely what you're going to do, you still need a database to store that data. Then a lot of mobile apps for enterprises have this requirement of which users need to authenticate with your corporate credentials. And if you ever try to do that from Xcode or Android, figure out how to integrate with Active Directory, not the easiest thing to do. Like, how do I get my iOS app to parse a SAML token, to promote the roles, to pass that token back, to impersonate a user? A lot of engineering goes into that. Then simple things like, I want to do push notifications, but my employees are using 20 different devices, so how can I do push notifications cross platforms? A lot of engineering goes into that. Then I want to integrate with Windows Azure or Amazon Web Services or Heroku or any cloud platform, more challenges. I want to integrate with my SAP or my SharePoint or my financial systems behind the firewall. How do I do that? What's a platform that allows me to do that? Or with NetSuite or Marketo or Salesforce.com or Microsoft CRM online. Then, but we're smart, we're good developers, so we figure out how to do that. How do I manage it? Once I build the first 3 apps, how do I manage that experience? How do I manage the front end? How do I manage the back end? How do I manage the apps? How do I manage the device? Every company has a mobile device management strategy these days, so how does my app tie into that? How does my app seamlessly integrate with my mobile device management technology? How do I manage the data? This is sort of, we call this, and we have some research about it, we call this sort of the holy grail of mobile operations management. Like, if you can manage the data that your mobile app is using, like nobody has solved that problem in a very efficient way. How do I test mobile apps? What does that mean? I distribute a mobile app to 100 of my employees. How do I test that what the way they're using it is correct? If the app crashes, how do I recover? How do I distribute the app over the air so they get automatic updates? How do I test for different carriers, for different networks, for different devices, for different screen sizes in the case of Android? Well, I guess iOS today as well. How do I monitor the performance of the app? How much CPU is using, how much memory, how many backend calls, how many concurrent users, what time of day? It totally sucks. When you present that picture to a mobile developer, they just want to kill themselves. They don't understand backend, they don't understand management, they don't understand security. They're there to write mobile apps. So if you're building a mobile app, you can forget about all this. I mean, you can figure it out. It's not that hard. When you're building 2 or 3, doing that consistently across the board, when you're using partners, consulting firms to bring somebody on board and say, hey, dude, this is a way we build mobile apps. We build this way, we do backend this way, we manage this way, we monitor this way, we distribute this way, we test this way. It's a really hard thing to do. Does that make sense? Has any of you guys encountered these challenges before? Yeah? You will, I'm telling you. This is the world we live in. We hear this like 20 times every day. Because as it turns out, building enterprise mobile apps is a little bit more complex than building consumer mobile apps. And I was having dinner, I think it was last month, with the guy who was the original VP of mobile for Facebook, Charles John Lee. He was the guy who banked on HTML5 for Facebook, which turned out to be a disaster. Well, this was a guy that was really, really bright engineer. And we were having this discussion about the fact that all mobile technologies today, on the front-end side, they evolve from a consumer perspective, right? They evolve to build apps for the App Store or Google Play. And as an enterprise, there's certain differences, very marked difference with consumer apps that those frameworks are not addressing. And when you compare that to previous paradigms, like let's say the web, there are frameworks that were tailored to the enterprise. Spring Source, And there were other frameworks that were tailored to the consumer, mostly, like Ruby on Rails, those type of things. So if you were using Spring Source for the web, 9 out of 10, you were building apps for the enterprise, because there were things that are like continuous integration and distribution and things like that that were enterprise problems, and you don't have those problems in the consumer market. So I tried to summarize some of the difference a little bit. I don't think I did a very good job, but at least it can illustrate some of the points in terms of the things that you consider when building mobile apps for consumer or for an enterprise. So for instance, from the security perspective, if you're building mobile apps for consumers, you most likely use an identity provider in the consumer market, Twitter, Facebook, something that everybody has. In the enterprise, you care about things like Active Directory. You care about things like how to manage the device with our watch or Mobile Iron or your good technology, any MDM you're using, how to integrate with app stores. When you talk about the backend infrastructure of, and this is the world Kidosen, the problem Kidosen tries to solve, the backend infrastructure for a consumer app is mostly geolocation things, gaming services, public data services. In the enterprise, it's about your backend. It's about your SAP. It's about your Cbol. It's about your database. That's what you care about. Now, the app topology, this to me is a fundamental difference. In the consumer market, you build one app that could have, a zillion users. Every enterprise out there knows that they're building multiple apps. So the infrastructure, the frameworks you have to use, the processes you're going to put in place, the practices you're going to establish have to target that dynamic. Multiple teams building multiple apps. And then when you look at the frameworks today, there is nothing out there for doing multiple apps. So basic things like passing data between apps, messages between apps, continuous integration, the stuff that we do every day in the enterprise is missing in mobile. There are companies now that are just starting to attack those problems. So we need a Ruby on Rails for front-end mobile. We need a cruise control.net for mobile. We need all those practices and this is what makes this world so exciting, because all those problems are completely greenfield. People are just starting to think about it. Startups are just getting funded these days to solve those type of problems. Then when you look at the team, one app is one team. So the guys building the Yelp mobile app is one team. The guys building the mobile games for Singapore, one team. In the enterprise, you have internal employees, you have third parties, you have consultants, you have partners, you have a bunch of distributed teams that you have to manage. And that means your infrastructure should be consistent across the board. As an architect in your organization, you should be able to partner with a consulting firm and tell them, guys, we use Sencha for front end, we use Kidosen for back end, we manage with our watch, we distribute with U-Test, we do this, we do that, this is our continuous integration process, this is how we log data, this is how we secure, and establish the best practices and the processes for enabling the implementation of mobile apps. You do today with every other field. If you're bringing in people to build ETL jobs, integration solutions, web solutions, I'm pretty sure you already have those processes in place. For mobile, it's not different, it's just new. Is that making sense so far? Then in the consumer market, you distribute to public app store, which means you get on the phone with Apple, put up with the stupid review process and all that, but you're done, right? The app is out there, people are gonna find you, and that's your distribution mechanism. In the enterprise, you deal with corporate app store, whether you're using the Apple Enterprise App Store, whether you're using something like Aperian or Kidosen or any existing app store, or whether you're using app containers with MDM technologies. We're going to talk a little bit about that with our watch, or Zen Mobile, or good technologies, or any of those things. And then on the front-end development, a company like Facebook, they care about two platforms, Android and iOS. Have one team for Android, one team for iOS, you're done. In the enterprise, you care about everything. right? Because you're gonna have one department that wants to build mobile web, another one that cares about native in Android, the marketing guys that didn't wanna work with IT and they hired this firm that they just do iOS development, and you have to, I mean, you cannot avoid it. It's almost impossible to say, hey, we're an HTML5 shop, because somebody somewhere is gonna decide that they wanna build native apps or hybrid apps or something else, and you have to deal with it, and you have to be prepared to support that initiative. Is that ringing a bell? Any of you guys here frustrated with the marketing department that hired an agency somewhere to build a mobile app that now you're stuck supporting? Right? That's a story in the enterprise. Now, because we like to, the big consulting firms, they have to get paid somehow. When this problem arises, everybody says, oh, you need a mobile strategy, right? You guys heard about that, right? Before. We need a strategy for building enterprise mobile apps. And these are a few ways on which you can think about a mobile strategy. You can think that's, you know, the excuse that my CIO that doesn't know anything about mobile used to stop this mobile project. We were going full force to build it. I said, no, you need a mobile strategy. Or, you know, the 300-page document that somebody is writing and we're paying them a lot of money for, and they're gonna tell us how we're gonna build mobile app. Or the latest buzzword out there that we're using to signal that we're good on mobile. Or the way I want to think about this, when we talk to organizations about a mobile strategy, which is funny because we're a product vendor, but we have a number of people that are well-known thought leaders in different mobile communities, so we're getting called every day literally to help CIOs and organizations just to think about mobile way beyond the scope of what we do as a platform. But it's really really enlightening. As I said, we're learning more from our customers and our customers are learning from us. So the way I like to think about a mobile strategy is a series of technology building blocks and best practices that you will put in place to deliver enterprise mobile apps. That's it. So we're big into agile, those type of things. Is start small, iterate, and adapt from there. So from our perspective, this is what I think are the areas that you should care in a mobile strategy. If you take care of this, you're probably 80% of the way there. There are other things, right? But if you don't want to spend a year and pay Accenture $1 million or something to give you a document back, there's nobody from Accenture here, right? Cool. Then, you know, and if you're a technologist like we are, you probably care about this aspect. How do I manage devices? How do I manage apps? What am I going to use from the front end? What technologies they match my skill set? I can find talent. I can hire talent. I'm comfortable partnering with. How am I going to do backend? How am I going to integrate with my SAP or my SQL Server or my Oracle? What are the practices there? How am I going to test, right? What does it mean to unit test in mobile, to functionally test, to end user test? How do I test across different carriers and things like that? How am I going to monitor? And what's the life cycle of a mobile app? How do I do continuous integration, build management, distribution, those type of things? Does that make sense? So what I would like to do now is to take each one of these and tell you what it means for your enterprise. What are some of the players in the space? What do they do well? And then we're gonna go into patterns of that touch upon multiple of this, like, and sort of provide a specific architectures that we have seen work in the real world. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions until now? Anybody confused? Anybody hating that picked this session to attend? The other ones were really bad though, so don't feel bad. That's not true. There were a couple of good ones. So here are a few topics or trends to consider, right? Mobile device management is somebody got really mad with me at a panel the other day because I said that MDM was an overreaction to people showing up with their iPhone for work, and I didn't realize I had an MDM vendor right next to me, so I got really, really upset. But everybody has an MDM strategy, right? It's one of those things that to be compliant today, you have to check the box. So every company out there of a decent size implemented this somehow, even if they're not using it, and everybody hates it and all this stuff. Enterprise app stores is another emerging trend. This thing, we're gonna talk about this term of backend as a service, mobile test cloud. These are some of the terminology that you're gonna hear day in and day out if you get into mobile. So mobile device management. This is, given that there are no MDM vendors here, I kind of repeat my thesis. The problem MDM tries to solve is how do I manage the devices in my organization? So from a marketing perspective, from the market perspective, not marketing, this is the hottest trend in enterprise mobile. It's the one that has the biggest market cap. And the reason for that was a few years ago when employees started showing up with their Android device or their iOS device to work, IT said, oh, people are doing this, what can we do? And the obvious answer was, let's manage the devices, which engineering-wise is a trivial problem to solve. There's nothing hard about managing your iPhones at work. But because everybody was doing it, there were a number of players that emerged into the space. And if you ever study the cycle of enterprise software technologies, there are some very well-defined trends. So pick any category, right? Enterprise social network, databases, business intelligence, MDM. The market start, there's some players that go after that. When it evolved a little bit, there are one or two small acquisitions. Then when it's reaching the peak of the market, the incumbents, the big players, the IBMs, the SAPs, the Microsoft, get into the game, acquire a few guys. There's only one or two of those that raise large amount of money to go public and be able to compete. And after that, the market either dies or stabilizes at a certain level. So MDM is past the peak of that cycle. So AirWatch raised $200 million to go public. SendPrice got acquired by SAP. Microsoft launched Windows Intune. IBM launched whatever Frankenstein they decided to launch. BlackBerry got into the game and they announced the MDN Cloud yesterday. And it's just a game between those guys now. And there's some, I'm sure VMware is going to acquire somebody or launch their own platform. But from there on, there is not much to that market anymore, and all those vendors are trying to do, okay, what else can we do? So, but does that make sense somehow? So when that fancy explanation is to tell you that if your CIO comes to you and said, oh, we're going to implement MDM, it only means that you're like 3 years behind. Like, it's nothing new or hot or exciting, and everybody hates it. Like, there is nobody that wakes up every morning and said, gee, I'm going to go and implement my MDM solutions and wipe people devices when they get... That's just like a crappy job to have, but you have to do it. So essentially, mobile device management, they focus on, this type of technologies focus on managing and securing connected devices. They apply security and access control policy at the device level, so they can log certain areas of your device. If there is an alert with your device, they can wipe it up completely. Somebody thought that was a good idea, and I thought if somebody wipes up my device, I'll kill him with a baseball bat. It can get deployed from or cloud or on-premise. So there are some vendors like Mobile Iron that has cloud deployments. BlackBerry yesterday at the Gartner conference in Orlando, they announced their cloud technology for this. Windows Intune is a cloud platform, and there are some interesting players in the market. So AirWatch is how many people here know or use AirWatch or your company? So these guys are sort of the market leaders, right? They got in really early, had a lot of money, captured that market. Good Technologies is also a good player. Not a good player, but a well-established player. Mobile Iron is very innovative. They have Together with AirWatch, they're sort of the two companies that have the most market cap, except that AirWatch has a lot of money. They've raised $200 million, and they're growing at a pace that Mobile Iron cannot compete with. But Mobile Iron has things like you can be deploying a private cloud behind the firewall in your data center. It can be deployed as a service and manage your connected devices. It has a lot of APIs, really easy to integrate with. Citrix, last December, acquired a company called SemPrice in California, and they rebranded SemPrice as ZenMobile. And ZenMobile is one of Citrix's top initiatives today, so they're putting a lot of money and resources behind it, and they're growing really, really fast. Even if you go to the, and both, for instance, Citrix AirWatch and Mobile Irons are good partners of ours, but even if you go to Citrix tagline as a company today, something mobile, like we power mobile workspaces with some stuff or something, but there is mobile in there. And there is this company, I'm sure you guys haven't heard about Mocana before. So Mocana is a very interesting case because they are, and again, I'm just giving you reference. We don't have a dog in this fight. This is just giving you reference or context for if you're evaluating this type of technologies. Mocana is a company that got a really solid reputation as a security player. So they built a lot of proprietary security techniques for NSA, CIA, so they can listen to our conversations on the phone and all the stuff. And they decided to go into mobile with this thing they call Mocana MAP, MAP, Mobile Application Platform. And they do a really good job in terms of security. So they have these app containers that you can put your enterprise apps on. They secure everything, encrypt the data, sign it, and all the stuff. So pretty much every company has this. I mean, it's one of those things that if you want to see Sarbanes-Oxley compliant or any of that crap, you have to have it. The question on the table is, how do you use it? How do you take advantages of these Frankensteins when you're building mobile apps? So another trend, after companies figure out how to manage devices, they start building apps, and somebody said, hey, I don't care so much if I manage your device, I still want to give you access to this app, but not this other app, or to these portions of this app. How do I do that? Say, oh, yes, we need an enterprise app store. So mobile application management is just a fancy way to say it's a mobile app store for enterprises. And there were some companies that emerged here, like Aperion. They were the ones who started this whole market. And their tagline was, MDM is dead, MAM is sort of the future. What they didn't thought of was that after AirWatch or Citrix or all these players capture enough market, the next thing on the line was MAM. So literally all the MDM players are now shipping with App Store and mobile application management capabilities. This is another way to say that mobile application management is becoming a feature of mobile device management and not a product in and of itself. But as a technology, what these platforms provide is a way to manage the access control and apply security policies at the app level. So I don't care if somebody steals your device. I'm not going to wipe up your data. I'm just going to block access to these two specific applications. Does that make sense so far? Anybody using enterprise app stores or things like that? Yeah, that's sort of an emerging trend. So the other area that as a company you have to consider in your mobile strategy is how are you going to build apps? Like, what does that mean? And it's not always picking the right technology, it's picking the right technology for you. So if you're a .NET shop, a Xamarin is you might like or dislike what they do, but it's a really good fit because your developers understand .NET, because your architects can own .NET code and establish best practice, because you get code coverage, because you can hire vendors or talent. Hiring a C# developer is slightly easier than hiring an Xcode and iOS developer. And if you have planned to grow your mobile team, probably all those things have to be into consideration. Or you really like HTML5. So what are you going to do? Are you going to use jQuery Mobile or Sencha or AngularJS or all of them? Like, what are the technologies you're gonna bank on? Normally, we advise that you pick what's your player for native and for hybrid and for mobile web, because it's really hard. If you get serious into mobile, it's really hard to do exclusive, to go exclusive into any of those categories. Most likely, you're gonna have to support multiple. You're gonna have scenarios for hybrid, scenarios for native, and scenarios for mobile web, and there is nothing hard about it. You just have to do the work and the research and say, for my organization, we think Sencha is our strategy for mobile web. We think Xamarin is our strategy for native, and we think that that PhoneGap is our strategy for hybrid. And obviously, this goes to, there's some models for building once and deploy everywhere. So for a company like Facebook, that doesn't make any sense, because with 500 million users, you can afford to have a dedicated iOS team and a dedicated Android team and optimize the heck out of the app to get the best performance and user experience. But as an enterprise, we don't have 5 million employees, so it probably having a single code base that you can compile or interpret to different runtimes makes a lot of sense, because it makes support easier, management easier, testability easier, and all those things. So whether you go with a hybrid interpreted technology like Titanium that is JavaScript and interpret at runtime to native, or where it's a cross-compile technology like Xamarin that you build in C# and compile a build time to Android or iOS, those strategies, they sort of make sense. And some interesting players in the space, obviously Accelerator, they, with the Titanium platform, they have a model in which you can write JavaScript or Ruby and actually compile, interpret to a native app. With something like PhoneGap, you get super rich hybrid capabilities of having an HTML5 app, so you can still develop on JavaScript most of the time, and having a native container that wraps that app, and there is models to pass data between the native portion of the app and the HTML5 portion of the app. You have technologies like Sencha that do a really, really good job on HTML5 with IDs and testing tools and stuff like that. And you have technologies like Xamarin that they do a good job targeting the .NET community specifically. You're a C# developer, you absolutely hate Objective-C, you're never gonna learn it, but you wanna build mobile apps, then there is a way to write the code in C# and through certain mechanisms compile to Android or iOS or Windows Phone. Does that make sense? So how many of you guys have evaluated some of these technologies? Anybody knows about Xamarin? This is mostly a .NET audience, so I'm guessing everybody knows what Xamarin is. Anybody? No? And how many people do not know what Xamarin is? Okay. So long story short, Xamarin came from Novell. Novell had a division from a company they acquired called Simian, and Simian were the guys who built the Mono project. The Mono project is the open source version of the .NET framework for different distributions of Linux. Actually, when I was in computer science school, in third year, I was developer number 4 in the Mono project. That's a story for another date over drinks. They, after Attachmate acquired Novell a couple of years ago, they said, what's this Mono thing here? And say, oh, that's .NET. I said, well, just laid off everybody. So they literally fired the entire team overnight and say, okay, so they, as part of Mono, they have built this thing called MonoDroid and MonoTouch that were writing .NET code for compiling to iOS or Android. And they took that technology and started a new company with some support from interesting players, and it has grown really, really fast. They're a great partner of ours, and I have obviously a friendship relationship with the founders, and they have grown really, really fast. You might disagree or agree with their technology. I personally am not a big fan of cross compilation technology as a principle, but there is a fact that there are millions of .NET developers out there that they just don't make good learners of Objective-C, or they don't understand dynamic languages very well. So if you can leverage that skill set to build mobile apps, there is something to be said by that fact. So that's what they're targeting. How many of you guys do not know what PhoneGap is? Everybody knows what PhoneGap is? Awesome. Accelerator? No? So this is write JavaScript, interpret to iOS or Android. Similar to Xamarin, but instead of compiling, it interprets at runtime. And Sencha, how many people? Okay, Sencha is like a huge JavaScript. I mean, it's JavaScript for HTML5, but they have IDs and testing tools on Architect Edition and a very good tool set that makes that experience extremely simple. So as a company, when you guys decide to go into mobile or start building mobile apps, you go through the process, I'm assuming, of evaluating some of these technologies and trying to select which ones are a better technologically and cultural fit for your organization, right? So that's what we think a solid mobile strategy should be for each one of those categories, and not like processes and crap like that. So the other part, now you decide how you're gonna manage devices, how to manage apps, how are you gonna do front end. When it comes time to, you need to talk to SharePoint, right, to get documents and streaming, or to SAP to get accounts, there is a lot of engineering that goes into that. How are you gonna do it? Are you gonna build services? Are you gonna use any platform? So a simple way to explain this is, every important milestone in the history of enterprise software came with a form of middleware and integration. Let's go back in history. B2B came with EDI. Relational database came with ETL. Service-oriented architecture came with ESBs. Software as a service came with iPaaS, technologies like MuleSoft, Boomi, and all these guys that do integration. Mobile needs something else. So the challenges for integrating your mobile app with your SAP are fundamentally different than the challenges of moving data between Salesforce.com and SAP. So there's concurrency and geolocation and security and data in transit and all sorts of crap that you have to handle, smaller data sets for that type of scenario that requires a new type of platform. So at the same token, every mobile app needs storage, or do SMS or push notifications cross-platform, or how do you log and instrument the app, or how do you manage configuration settings, or queuing, and all the stuff that is horizontal mobile capabilities. And they can be applied to on-premise or on cloud, whether you're a financial organization that wants to build or deploy that middleware capability on-premise, or whether you're fine using public or hybrid deployments. So there are players that went after that space, including us. That's why my company, Kidosen, Solve, and we have over deploying 17 data centers at over 60-something global 1,000 companies in production, and partnerships with everybody who is anybody in that enterprise market, from Google to Microsoft to Adobe to anybody. There is a company in Ireland, Fit Henry, that is a great technology in the space. It's one of our competitors. We think they're great. IBM has Worklight, which is an Israeli company they acquired a few years ago, and they've rebranded that as WebSphere Mobile Services. So if you don't care paying $2 million, that's a good option for you. But it gives you the end-to-end experience. How do you, traditional IBM, right? Design with this, develop with this, but they give you the backend infrastructure as well. SAP has SMP, which in the Frankenstein categories is at whole another level above IBM. So that was technology they acquired from Sybase, technology they acquired from Cyclo. And that's an emerging trend. So if you hear the term mobile backend as a service out there, that's what it means, right, for enterprises. It's mobile middleware, is how do I enable backend capabilities to my mobile app? So when you're formulating an enterprise mobile strategy, somebody already purchased our watch, so you don't have a lot to say at that point, but you can say, well, I'm going to manage apps with Aperion. We decided that we do Sencha and Xamarin for front end. We decided that we do Kidosen or Worklife for back end, and that's, you see how this start taking shape, right? You bring a vendor on board, say, dude, when you're going to talk to SharePoint, this is the way to do it. Right here, the SDKs, this is how you do it. This is how we manage. So after we do that, and you have your apps built from tip to tail, comes the time of testing. And testing in mobile is the same way integration is different. Testing in mobile is absolutely fundamentally different to any type of testing we do today. When you test in mobile, you care about 4 things or 3.5. You care about functionality, of course, but you care about carriers, right? Like testing this with Telefonica or Vodafone or AT&T is fundamentally different. So you have to test for carriers. You have to test for networks, right? Whether you are in Vodafone UK versus Germany versus something else. And you have to test for screen sizes because, hey, there is only 501 distributions of Android out there, so you better test for a Galaxy S4 or for a Nexus phone or for a small LG phone and see how that user experience look like. The problem with that is that it's really, really hard to automate. So think about it. If I tell you, hey, I built this mobile app. I want to test with these 3 carriers. I want to test this use case. I want to test with these 500 devices. Think about building a platform that automates that. It's almost impossible. So there's some interesting technology in the space, but some of the market leaders in the space, believe it or not, they do manual testing. So any of you guys heard about the term mechanical Turk before? So you guys know what mechanical Turk is an Amazon technology. It came from, it's an Amazon Web Services. But it was, it's based on a famous anecdote. There was a chess grandmaster in the 1800s that toured all over Europe with a machine that the machine could play chess, right? And he was defeating some of the top grandmasters in the world at the time. And somebody, at some point, somebody looked behind the machine, and there were 2 grandmasters playing chess, and they managed to fool everybody because of how rapid they reacted. So the machine was called the Turk. And Amazon, years after, they built this thing called Mechanical Turk, that is a platform on which you can model a task and assign it to tens of thousands of people that take that task, complete it, give you results, and you pay them for that. And all that is automated as a service. So, for instance, Mechanical Turk is really popular in mobile gaming testing. So Zing is building a game, they have to test across in these different geographies. They put the game out there, model the use cases, give it to 1,000 people. The test results get completed in a matter of minutes, and they decided who to pay. For clinical studies, it's also popular. So people are doing surveys or things like that, and they, a clinical institution, they need a sample of 10,000 people. That's really hard to do manually. So they use Mechanical Turk for that. So using the principles of Mechanical Turk, there are a number of companies that they have figured out how to do mobile testing. So you can go in one platform like UTest and say, hey, I want to test this app on this use case, on these 5 distributions of Android. I care about Telefonica, Vodafone, AT&T, Verizon. I care about Eastern Europe, Western Europe, South America, Northern Africa, and go. And then in a matter of minutes, they do that and give you results back, and you can analyze and retest. Does that make sense? I mean, it sounds crazy. At least it sounded to me the first time I heard about this, but it's really, really efficient. If you're fine just doing the automated unit test, you don't think your platform needs multiple carriers or you control the devices, there are platforms like Perfecto Mobile that they do a good job on automated testing. And these are sort of the 2 players we like a lot. There are more. Even Xamarin just announced their test cloud that is also manual test, and it's actually out of Denmark. It's a group out of Denmark that it was, I was having dinner with the CEO of Xamarin. He said, well, yeah, it's all, we have this, the entire test cloud is in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And I'm like, why in Copenhagen? I said, yeah, they managed to acquire a company that did that there. But again, if at the very beginning, all this enterprise mobile stuff is about starting small and iterating. So if you don't care about that, you're fine with automated testing. But after you do that, the problem is, how do I monitor this stuff? Now I tested the app, I put it out there, I have 500 people using it. The app crashes and I have no idea what happened. Right? How do I recover from that? How do I monitor it? How do I know how much memory is using, how many calls to SAP, all the stuff. So application performance monitoring is becoming a standalone category within mobile, the same way it became a standalone category within web or systems. And there's technologies that are used for app crash monitoring, performance usage, memory use, and they can be both applied for consumer and enterprise, and they can be deployed on-premise or on the cloud. The two undoubted market leaders in this category are Criticism, if I can get past that name, and New Relic, which is a top vendor in the app monitoring space. They have a version for mobile app called New Relic for mobile apps, and it's very, very solid. There are others, but these two are sort of the top players in the space. Is that making sense so far? Because now we're going to talk architecture and real stuff. Did you think you got valuable information out of that little listing? Cool. So let's talk about the rest of the session. Is a summary of architecture practices that we're seeing out there, about problems that we're seeing our customers encounter day in and day out. And we either have seen how they solve it, homegrown. We seen how other technologies solve it. So, but in general, we're going to give you an idea of those practices. Before we do that, are there any questions about the previous section about the different vendors and things? Yes.
The integration to the backend.
The
Integration to the backend, you mentioned various companies.
I'm sorry. The questions about what?
About the integration to the backend.
Oh, the integration backend. Yeah. So.
What does that give you on top of like what the ESB?
I'm not. So if you already have services built on PHP.
Yeah. So if you've got ESB providing services already to various.
Yes. So the question is, correct me if I'm wrong. We talk about integration technologies. What happens if I already have a bunch of services via, so either homegrown or via an ASP that sort of abstract that category? So the answer is, if you already have a service infrastructure in place, I personally think you still need a platform to broker those services to mobile, but that doesn't mean that you need to start at that point. The reason I mentioned that, and it's really hard to convince an organization at that stage of doing it, it's more like, go try it, and when you fail, we can talk type of thing. The reason I mentioned that is that most service infrastructures out there, they're not optimized for high concurrency, they're not optimized for geofencing, they're not optimized for on-demand caching, they're not optimized for offline communication and data reconciliation, and stuff that you care about on mobile. But having said that, if you have services that are already abstracting the backend capabilities of some of your systems, you should definitely start with that. At that point, you still need to figure out, how am I going to get my mobile apps to talk to those services? So am I going to expose it to the internet? So am I going to BPM? And am I going to use a middleware? And those things. And the other thing is, not everything is a service, unfortunately. So when the case comes, hey, I need to build these apps that talks to Civo, and I need it in a month, and the effort of building a service and put it out there and manage that consistently across the board because you already have 10 apps becomes a problem, that's when these platforms come to play. If the argument you're making, which is very valid, but it's an argument that also applies in the ESB world, right? What do you need a middleware to talk between SAP and Salesforce.com if you have services on both ends? Well, because you still care about retransmissions and data capture and error recovery and orchestrations and all that crap. The mobile is not different. So for instance, the first two connectors we built on Kidosan were SOAP and REST. Because, if you have a service, we want to tie to that, but we also want to give you that management experience that you can click on a mobile app and see my app is calling this service 10 times, this or 4, authenticating to Active Directory. I can manage logs and all this stuff. But, and there is the point that those platforms are not only integration. So storage, push notifications, SMS, identity management, logging, those things are horizontal capabilities that are needed by mobile apps. So, any other, yes?
What about the IAPA management solutions?
Yes.
FPG,
Great. The question is, there are companies out there like Mashery, APG that give you a good, that do a good job on helping you model and manage APIs. So can you use that for model? The answer is absolutely yes. Actually, we have a great relationship with APG. We're going to announce a new board member that comes from APG. I was talking to Shed, the CEO, this Monday. The thing is, those platforms are good helping you define APIs, where the mobile middleware are good on giving you the APIs type of deal. It's a sort of different. And APG, well, let's not talk about vendor specific. Those type of technologies are good about, hey, Mr. Customer, let me help you define a RESTful service here that can eventually be used for mobile, but they're not mobile first platforms. So they don't have the notion of a mobile app. They don't have app stores. They don't have capabilities like geofencing or contextual security or offline communications or stuff that is important on mobile. But if you have an APG or something like that, it's definitely a good gateway to do mobile. The same argument applies there. When you need storage, well, you're going to build an API for your SQL server, and then every time you need a new app, are you going to provision new database and automate that process? Or you go with a platform that gives you storage for your mobile app or login or configuration. APG's built everything. We help you manage. And I keep talking about APG. APG in particular is morphing from or going from an API management company to more like a data analytics type of company. They're focusing on that market. Companies like Mashery. Mashery never had a strong play in the enterprise. Now with Intel, they might, Layer 7, those type of companies, they're good at doing that. If you have RESTful services, they can broker that and manage it. They don't give you horizontal capability, and they're not mobile first. So if you want app stores or have the notion of an app as the center of your world, you don't get that with those platforms. Any other questions? Awesome. So let's talk about a problem-solution approach, practical approach to some of those, the biggest problems in enterprise mobile. So let's talk with the storage. We were talking about that, right? Every mobile app needs storage, and every time I build an app, I need to call my DBA, I need to provision a database, and the guy just hates me because every mobile app needs to cache data and settings and all the stuff. So the solution to this is leverage a per app storage model. Leverage a model where you implemented yourself, which you can add. There's good technology out there for doing that, where you use a platform. Use a model that gives you a storage unit that is isolated at the app level or isolated at the user level for the app, and that you can provision on demand very elastically, which speaks to a cloud platform. So normally, as a mobile developer, if I need to cache data, for an app, I want to do this from my Android app or something like that. That line of code, that's all I need to know. I don't need to understand Oracle or SQL Server or anything like that. So, and you have technologies out there that allows you to provision data. And again, this is non-critical data. This is not your data warehouse or your SAP accounts. This is the data you're caching because a user login, you're caching the session, or because you're caching certain, the preferred settings or stuff like that in the app. So there is technology out there where you're using a mobile backend as a service, where you're using MongoHQ, where you're using Amazon Web Services or something that allows you to very easily provision a database on the fly, do the storage, deprovisioning, and things like that. And you can, that model of if I have two apps, I can provision storage on demand and it's isolated to the app. So as I add more apps, they're not going to collide with each other, and I don't need resources from my enterprise other than money. I mean, it's really, really appealing. And again, every mobile app needs storage. So that's a given. So, and that's something that we tend to not factor in. If you're building one app, you can get away with, hey, I'm gonna use Oracle or SQL Server. But eventually, if you're building multiple, you need to do something like that. And more importantly, you're minimizing the learning curve for the mobile developer. Those guys don't understand database. That's not their DNA. I mean, they don't know what a DBA is and what those letters stand for. So they care about, I need to read and write data, and that's it. And then if they need to talk to your data warehouse, sure, they need to integrate with Oracle. That's a different type of problem. First, does that one make sense? Cool. So this is a very common one. My mobile app needs to authenticate to Active Directory, or to Data Power, or to something I use as my directory store on-premise. That's really, really hard to do. Think about it. All those technologies, they speak things like WS Federation, WS Trust, SAML, stuff like that that doesn't exist in Xcode or Android. Like, how do I get those apps to, as a mobile developer, how do I get that learning curve minimized so you can build a mobile app that authenticates to Active Directory without becoming a security expert? And the answer is, use a mobile first federation pattern. What the heck does that really mean? So there's services out there, whether you're using, again, a mobile backend, a mobile middleware where you're using something like Okta or Pin Identity or Amazon ID, I think it's called, or AWS ID, or there are services that know how to build federation between different identity providers. And if you build one of those services and tailor it from mobile and establish a trust relationship with your AD, which means it could be via ADFS2, which already supports those protocols. It could be something between Windows, Azure, ACS, but something like via that service, I can authenticate to my Active Directory, and those two entities trust each other. You can provide a model that an iOS developer only needs to do something like, hey, I'm going to log with ADFS, here's my username and password, and that's all they need to do. After that calls get triggered, the flow could be something like this. You query your mobile service and say, what's ADFS for me? And they say, oh, it's this endpoint, which we already trust. It's going to, the app invokes that endpoint with those credentials. The service authenticates you to ADFS, issues a SAML token. The token gets back to the app. The token gets presented to that service. The service reissues a SAML token, so you're authenticated in both places, and both identity providers trust each other, so you can come this way, you can come that way. But from the mobile developer, this is all you need to do. Now, try to, if you doubt me, ask a mobile developer to figure out how to parse a SAML token, promote the roles, and then when you make a call to SharePoint or SQL Server behind the firewall, pass the SAML token, impersonate the user. It's just a lot of engineering that has nothing to do with your app. And then if every time you build an app, you have to go through that pain, it's just, it doesn't scale. So building that infrastructure, and there's technology out there. We built something like this on Kidozen, and this is actually a Kidozen example. But if you weren't using Kidozen, there's good technology. You use Okta, you use Pin Identity, that are services that just give you that capability. And they don't give you anything else, but for identity federation, they're really, really good on solving that problem. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. It's there. It's one of the slides. It's not the next one, but it's the one after that. So the question was about dual factor authentication. We're gonna talk about all that. Now, remember the point on which I said there are no good frameworks for enterprise mobile apps and the difference between consumer and mobile apps. A great example of that is I have two apps in the enterprise, right? Because enterprises have multiple apps. A user authenticated to one app, switched to the other, and now they have to re-authenticate themselves. That's a problem everybody has, right? And if you're not using an app container, which is like a concept of the 1880s, if you're not using something like that, that you have to authenticate to this global entity that knows how to flow credentials between all the other apps, which is completely retarded. If you're not using that, there is no easy way to solve it. So a simple way to address this problem is let's figure out how to reuse a security token between different apps. And this is a pattern that, again, there's no platform that solves this, no keydots and no nothing, but we have seen several customers do this. The model is an iteration of the previous pattern on which you are authenticating to AD or something via that federation gateway. Now you're authenticated. There is a token cache that could be stored on a mobile-first database like SQLite, or a database that lives on the device, or just in memory. On a shared memory space, you encrypt that token, save it. In memory is probably safer if you care about people hacking into your mobile database. And then the other app can just get that token from there and present it back. And the only key is to make sure that the token is not app-specific. Instead, it should be user-specific, right? Where it's the same identity of the user, and the app that the user is coming from is just a claim or a portion on the security token that could be changed. But that way, when you start the second app, it's going to say, oh, do I have a security token that is valid in this cache? Oh, yes, let me get it, flow it through, and that's it. Right? And it's super, super simple to implement with existing technology. Does that make sense? So because I paid that gentleman to ask me that question, I have the answer here. So another problem that companies normally face is, how do I enable dual-factor, multi-factor authentication across different mobile apps? And the answer for that is, once you build your authentication service, just use an extensibility point that does a dual-factor. So there are 1,000,001 services out there for doing dual-factor authentication. Microsoft acquired FormFactor. Okta has one. Pin Identity has one. FormFactor is now called Windows Azure dual-factor authentication service or something like that. But essentially, that's another service that goes alongside your authentication service. The key here is, from a mobile developer, I shouldn't care. So the classic mistake that we see a lot of organizations make is, whether you use unifactor or multi-factor authentication, that should not belong in the app. That's something that should belong at the management layer. That some IT pro said, yeah, dual factor from now on for this guy, and the mobile app just should be equipped to handle that. But as a mobile developer, I should not design because I'm authenticating whether I'm using 5 factors or 1, right? When you're going to call me 5 times on 5 different phones or just accept my credentials, it doesn't matter. The flow is the same. So essentially, somewhere here, you're going to flag that this app 1 it requires dual factor authentication, app 2 doesn't. And then when the same flow triggers, I make a call requesting my IDFS, I'm going to get a text or a phone call or a push notification back saying, hey, here's a challenge, answer the challenge. I answer the challenge. The multi-factor service says, yeah, and then the entire flow triggers from there as we discuss. Now, multi-factor is super interesting because we see a lot of companies use multi-factor security depending on user geography, for instance. If you're coming from Germany, we're going to challenge you. If you're coming from the UK, you can just go right through, or things like that. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Cool. So this one it seems trivial, but it's not. How do I we're building this app. It requires push notifications. We have 5 types of devices. How in the world do I do that? So all notification services, Apple, Google, BlackBerry, Microsoft, they're completely different. The way you interact with them, they don't even use the same terminology. So the answer is just broker, build something or use something built that brokers the communication between all those guys. We wrestled with this problem about a year ago. And the abstraction we found that works well across all these guys is a channel. So you can subscribe to a channel or publish to a channel, and a channel in Google notification cloud translate to something, in the Apple notification service translate to something else, in Microsoft is something else, but this concept you can map it to all of them, including BlackBerry, where we play with other concepts that weren't exactly that trivial, but essentially as a mobile developer, I can say, I'm gonna subscribe to a channel, and when somebody publishes to that channel, I get a push notifications, or you can publish or subscribe to a channel, and that's super simple. You can use a mobile enterprise middleware. You can use services like Urban Airship. There are companies like Urban Airship does this for marketing, just for marketing, right? Like this company, I'm gonna publish a marketing campaign via push notifications, and it goes to all devices, and I can see which ones actually open or ignore the push notification and all the stuff. Does that make sense? Or actually, you can build this. It's really not that hard. You can build a service that brokers that communication. So here's another one of the problems that we don't have good solutions for, because there are no frameworks for enterprise mobile development, is how do I exchange data between apps? Hey, I'm building 5 apps. These apps, like we build services and web apps today that they communicate with each other, right? Like why couldn't I do that in mobile in an efficient way? So the answer to that is, unfortunately, you have to build it. But a good pattern for that is building a message passing pop-up pattern inter-app. And you can use technology like either shared memory technology in mobile, or mobile databases like SQLite, which exists in Android, exists in iOS, exists in Windows Phone. And just do something like you can publish to a channel or a topic or however the heck you want to call it. I'm interested on the order update, right? And that records something here. Here's an order update message, and then you're pulling from that, or you use shared memory. But that simple pops-up pattern between apps is very easy to implement. And then as you're building more apps, you can tell your developers, this is the little framework we use to pass data between apps, and you don't have people just building their own thing over and over and over again. And that's super, I mean, you still have to build it in iOS and Android and all that, right? But it's a very simple pattern to build. Any questions about that one? Cool. Well, how do I integrate with the world we live in, right? Like, how do I get from my mobile app to my Cibo behind the firewall in less than 2 years? So, because when you study this problem, you realize that mobile communication with line of business systems is fundamentally different than just building services or something like that. We need to care about small data sets, concurrency, caching, all the stuff. You know, the easiest thing to do is build a mobile first service or business connector or something that talks to your system. And by mobile first is you care about those things. You know that you can at any point have 1,000 users that kind of spike in and out. You know that your data is going to be cached online. You know that you need to encrypt with different mechanisms depending on the mobile consumer. You care about what app the call is coming from, like mobile app itself. You care about geofencing, right? If it's coming from South America, I'm going to route you to this location. If it's coming from this carrier, I'm going to do this other thing. So in that case, the problem you're trying to solve here is you hire this company that is building an app that is talking to your SAP, and you don't want to spend a year just figuring this out with 3 people. The guy that knows SAP that is going to build a service, the guy that knows Windows Phone that is going to build the app, the guy that is going to handle the security and all the stuff, right? You want to get your mobile developer to say, dude, write this code, you're done, right? And then I have a way to manage that. When I do that in 3 apps, I have a way to monitor it, to manage, to secure it. So whether you build it yourself, whether you use Kidosan, whether you use Worklight, whether you use something else, it should be as simple as this. This is a Kidosan example in which you're talking to SAP and Salesforce.com, and in the SAP case, you're getting the leads, the items, in the SAP and the Salesforce.com case, you're getting the leads. And look at that, the experience is the same. You're invoking an operations with certain parameters, and there is a consistent way to manage that. You give that to an iOS and Android developer, they can do the job, and you take care of the infrastructure. You tell that guy, we're going to invoke an RFC in SAP. I say, okay, like, let's find somebody that knows how to interoperate with SAP. Let's build a service on top of it. Let's front-end that service with the with some firewall or something to expose it to the internet. Let's figure out how to invoke it. Oh, by the way, there is another app coming down the pipe. I need to figure out how to manage that consistently. Now we're doing NetSuite or Marketo. How do I do it? So it just becomes like a really hard problem to have, like, very, very quickly. So if you can abstract that and get that out of the way, like the same way you did it for SO or something else, like a good solution to have. Any questions until that point? So another thing, now you figure out how to talk to SAP. Now is, I just realized that SAP is really not optimized for 10,000 users hitting the system at the same time or during spikes or stuff like that, right? So the solution we have seen a lot of customers implement is a mobile-first data cache, on which you complement that pattern with a caching infrastructure similar to the storage infrastructure, a caching mechanism that caches data isolated at the app or at the user level. And it can be, it can be retrofitted or updated automatically from the connector, and it could be, you can use technology like Redis or Memcache that are really, really good at this and have expiration times and all that, but the important thing is you can provision caches on demand opposed to doing it up front. So I can just say, hey, I'm gonna call SAP, just cache the results, or cache the top 10 results or things like that, and then minimize the burden of hitting SAP, and I'm just speaking on SAP because it's the logo I have there, but on any line of business system, hitting it all the time. Does that make sense? Then, you figure all that out and somebody calls and say, the performance of this app totally sucks. And you say, oh yeah, where are you using it from? I say, oh, from Shanghai, right? Like, if you're building apps that particularly for field force, Salesforce management, people that travel all the time, that are using those apps across corporate boundaries, particularly in the EU. I mean, there are like 1,000,001 regulations in terms of where the data can be used. So optimizing that performance according to user location is important. And the solution, for instance, this is what we implemented on Kiddos and as a platform. Developers don't see it, but this is a problem. We actually struggled with this for a good part of 6 months. And every time somebody comes to us with this problem, we recommend what we did, which is implement a geo-aware traffic manager. So implement a thing. So first of all, know your users. Your users are gonna be leveraging these apps from 5 continents. Make sure that you have deployment footprints closer that can address those locations, right? Where those different data centers or something, we find a way to solve that for us. We automatically deploy with 2 data centers with replication across, but that solution doesn't apply to everybody. But essentially, you're gonna have multiple deployments of your backend, and then put something up in front of that is geo-aware, where that's a Dynatrace, where that's a Windows Azure Traffic Manager if they ever ship that thing, or whether that's any technology that knows how to intelligently route a request based off where the user is coming from. And where the user is coming from is not only location, it could be carrier, it could be something else, it could be network, right? Saying, hey, if you're using Vodafone UK here, this is the guy for you, right? Or if this data center is backed up, this service instance, this is the one that is taking those calls. Having that in mobile is super important, because people using mobile apps, they travel all the time. This becomes a problem. This is a problem that exists in mobile that doesn't exist really in other technologies. Does that make sense? Yes? So a good pattern for that is services with a geo-traffic DNS in front, storage replicated across different data centers, and that should be on a stateless communication, and that should take care of 80% of the problem. Now, we saw how to use, how to distribute data, exchange data between apps in the same device. What happens if apps are in the different device? So I'm using this mobile app on my iPad. I finish and I switch to this other app on my iOS that needs the same data I was using. Like how in the world I do that? And there is a simple mode on using event-based communication between apps. So traditional apps like chat or enterprise messengers or things like that, for mobile, I mean, use this pattern, right? I can subscribe to a channel and publish to a channel, and I have this mobile service that knows how to distribute data. The same thing we were doing for push notifications, but for data. Like, hey, I want to, when there's a new order in SAP, I want to know. I want to do something with the order and publish it to a bunch of other apps that are interested on that data. So another pattern is, this is, to me, and I wish I had, we don't have, or we do, but we cannot talk about it. This, to me, is a holy grail of enterprise mobile, and it's something that nobody has really solved in a very long time. We spent a good part of this year looking at this problem and built a prototype that we're incubating, but I mean, we think it's going to work, but we don't know. So the problem is, how do I secure my business data? So the industry, as we know, already solved the device management problem. I can manage your device securely, wipe it out, anything. Then there are app stores that can secure your app. There are things that can secure your files and documents, like Citrix ShareFile or Box or things like that, SkyDrive Pro. What we don't have is a good solution for how do I manage my SAP account that are being used by these three apps? How do I manage my Salesforce.com leads? And by manage is how do I apply policies that make sense in the mobile-first manner? So what I would like to live in a world on which IT pros will have something like this. And I can tell you what we built. It was a partnership with Cornell University, but it's not going to be the solution, the entire solution to this problem. This is pretty much an standing problem in today's enterprise. I would like an IT pro to have a way to visualize all the data sources that are being used by the apps. So just stay with me for a second. Think if in your app store you could have another section that is, this is the data your app is using. Your SAP accounts, your Salesforce.com leads, your market opportunities, your Siebel, blah. And you can right-click on one of those and say, apply policy. And you can apply policies that are mobile-first in nature. So you could say, if any app is using my Siebel opportunities outside the UK, do a dual-factor challenge. Or if anybody's hitting that data from a jailbroken iPhone, block the access. Or that data, if you're accessing from North America, has to go encrypted back. Or you need to if you're accessing from China, want to log everything every record that app is. Stuff that is really mobile first, right? We have solutions for that on the web with data power and all that at the data level. And the thesis is, if you do that, you don't care so much about how to manage the apps, because if somebody gets access to your app, I just block the data, and everybody just cares about the access into the business data. That's a sensitive part. Everything else is irrelevant. And certainly, I don't care so much about your device. Somebody steals your device, not a problem. I just block access to all my corporate data sources. Does that make sense? So this is conceptually how it should work, and we built a prototype of. The reason this is so hard is not because people are stupid or anything. It's because this is a second-tier problem. In order to solve this, you need the mobile middleware first. So you need to connect to SAP in order to manage the SAP data. And the industry is just starting to figure out the middleware problem. But everybody, we hear this from CIOs like every day, right? Like, can I manage my business data, right? If I can do that, I don't care about anything else. If you want to have that conversation, if you're having that problem, I would love to. I don't think we have any good solutions yet, but I would love to hear from you a little bit more and tell you what we have done. So the other thing is, well, my apps are using this data. How do I protect the data that is stored in the device, right? Like if the data ever gets to the device, how do I protect that, given that real-time access is not always the best solution? And the answer here is encrypt the data that is going to be locally persisted, but encrypt it in a way on which you're using a temporary key that is based on the user identity. It sort of works like this. You make the call to SAP Salesforce.com, you get the data gets stored encrypted in a temporary cache, but that encryption key, the public, private, whatever you're going to use, is based on the user login. So after 10 seconds, when the app tries to decrypt that, it's going to make a call back to authentication service and say, hey, just give me another key to decrypt that, and if you don't have the valid identity for the token exchange, you cannot decrypt that data. And we have seen customers in like very regulated industries implementing this. Does this make sense? Cool. And it's really not super hard to do. The trick is that one of the keys has to be based on the user identity. So another problem is, we talk about this, how in the world do I test mobile apps? And the answer is consider, things that test across carrier networks and devices. And we talk about technologies like U-Test, help you this, but let's call it mobile test cloud, where you use Xamarin U-Test, something that I could say, I want to test across these devices, I want to test across these networks, I want to test these use cases, go and give me results. Do not try to implement that homegrown. It's really, really hard to solve. Another problem is, hey, I shipped this app, it's out there, people are using it, crash, how in the world do I recover from that? Well, there is good technologies out there for login service and mobile crash, particularly because this was a huge problem in the Apple ecosystem. The App Store was notorious because you ship an app, the app crashes, and Apple sends you a report like 5 days after when nobody cared about your app anymore, and there was no solution to be taken. So there was technology built to analyze a crash and report it immediately. And the pattern here is have a crash log collector. We have one with Kidozen. You can implement your own. It's something that is constantly listen for errors, log to a service, and visualize that. From there are technologies like Crashlytics and all that do that very well. So another problem is I have a lot of mobile web applications. I have a lot of mobile websites. I use Sencha. But all my NDM tools, my AirWatch and all that, they work only with native apps. So how do I bridge a gap? And the answer is consider hybridizing your app, if that's even a word. But there is technology like PhoneGap Build, which is brand new. This is PhoneGap as a service. So PhoneGap hosted in the cloud, the compiler. You can pitch an HTML5 app via an API call, say, here's my mobile web app, everything CSS, HTML5, JavaScript. As an output, it gives you a hybrid app in the operating system you want as a dynamic call. So for instance, in our app store, what we do is we allow an IT pro to say, right-click, create a mobile version, and we use PhoneGap Build behind the scenes to make that call and give you a hybrid version of it that you can put in your AirWatch app container and manage it that way. And that's a very simple way to still develop for HTML5 but manage with the others. Because I don't have a lot of time, there are other best practices that you should consider. Are you going to use an app store or not? Are you going to do cross-compilation implementation? Continuous integration is really hard on mobile. There is a new company I was looking at that they do sort of a Jenkins and cruise control for mobile. And we were testing to see. We struggle with this problem, how to efficiently do builds of Kidozen, of the Kidozen sample apps. Over-the-air deployment is important, right? After you distribute an app to 100 users, you want to distribute new versions automatically without having to bring your iPhone and plug it into a workstation. So you want to do over-the-air deployment. Compliance in terms of policies and things like that is also hard to solve. Like, how do I make sure this app is HIPAA compliance, PHI compliance, or something like that? Mobile HTML5 hosting, another high problem to solve. Web servers today, the ones Apache, IIS, and all that, are not optimized for mobile. So you need a mobile-first web server, ones that understands your location and caching and context and things like that. Does that make sense? Cool. So let's wrap it up. What we discussed today is that there's some very tangible, fundamental difference between consumer and enterprise mobile apps. We talk about that. to me, the answer, you don't need an enterprise mobile strategy. You need an agile enterprise mobile strategy. You need to look at those building blocks and say, I'm going to start with this platform, so I'm going to start with these practices, and I'm going to start. And then I'm going to iterate from there. I'm going to determine that Kidosen is a piece of crap pro that I don't like, and I'm going to switch to something else. I'm going to determine that Xamarin is a good fit for me, and all this stuff. So you need to start quickly by continuously iterating over that strategy and take into consideration all those patterns. How am I going to enable backend and front end and identity management and testing and monitoring and all those things. And I mean, for us, obviously, we see this all the time. Backend integration is the _1 problem that you're going to spend a ton of time focusing on how to streamline that layer for your developers. With that, I would like to open for Q&A. This is a little bit of my information. You can email me there through this web blog, or through my Twitter feed. I try to be very responsible on email if I can. Any questions? Was this like a complete piece of crap session, or do you think you learned something? Any questions? Going once? Going twice? All right, well, thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the show.